Well, I just finished watching the Apple event and the iPhone 14 release, and so I'm here with a quick video, a reaction video of sorts, to tell you what I think and whether you should upgrade. On Twitter, right before the event, I tweeted out my wish list for the iPhone 14. And these were kind of in order, but not really, but kind of. Number 1, USB-C. Number 2, an f2 telephoto aperture, because the 3x telephoto on the 13 Pro is just not very good, especially in low light. 4K cinematic mode at 24 frames per second. Larger sensors on all the cameras. Manual control in the native camera app. And 4K 120 frames per second slow-mo. So what did we actually get? Well, the number one thing is we got 4K cinematic mode and 24p, and this is on the iPhone Pro, 14 Pro, and the Pro Max. The standard iPhone, they didn't make any mention, so I'm not 100% sure. We did get larger sensors. All the cameras and lenses are better in low light. That is pretty cool. No manual control in the native camera app, at least I haven't seen that. That could be in the iOS update in the future, not necessarily tied to hardware. And then no 4K 120. Apple has really stuck with 4K 60 for a while. We've had that since what, the iPhone 8 or so? And so I would really like to see them advance on slow-mo in the near future. If they put their minds to it, I'm sure they can do it. But I'm really glad to see 4K cinematic mode. To me, that and the 48 megapixel main camera now are probably the highlights for photo and video. Super disappointed there's no USB-C. That to me is still pretty shocking. I made a podcast recently and I was predicting what they would add or what they would need to add for me to upgrade and for me to recommend people upgrading. And USB-C was really at the top of the list and they didn't include that. And so, man, I just can't believe that, because we can shoot ProRes and all these big files and we have no easy way to get it off the phone. And so that's an issue. That's a real issue. They've got to address that in the next phone, the iPhone 15. Can we start talking about that one yet? So obviously, without having the phone in my hands yet, and I will be ordering one, because regardless of the upgrades for me running a channel about iPhone filmmaking, I've got to get one. I've got to buy one. Now, whether you should or not is another story. The cinematic mode, 4K, 24p, 24 frames per second is really a big thing in my opinion. A lot of people have poo-pooed cinematic mode and they don't use it. Part of the reason is, I believe, because it was 1080 only, and it was also only 30 frames per second. Now it goes up to 30 frames per second. And so that is huge, and I'm hoping they have improved the cutout using the LiDAR. Again, I will know more once I test it out, but I use that all the time, especially for B-roll, for stuff that is not moving, doesn't have soft edges. It works very well in those conditions. The other thing that is pretty cool is now you have a 24 millimeter lens. Now, whether or not that'll work with external lenses is another situation, because we've had 26 millimeter lenses forever or thereabouts. Although the older iPhones may have been a 28, I forget. But at any rate, a 24 millimeter, and they have this new, they call it a quad pixel sensor. And so it's more or less like having 4 lenses. And so now we have the 24, and then we have a 48 millimeter, so a 2 times tele. And then we have a 3 times tele, which is 77 millimeter. And so it's nice now that we can get that mid-range, more or less a 50 millimeter shot without adding an external lens. And so that is pretty cool. Another thing from a video perspective that I haven't mentioned is they have this thing called action mode. And so it's a stabilization mode that's also on the regular iPhone 14. It's not just on the Pro. It is 2.8K at 60 frames per second. And it really looks like you're using a gimbal. Now, the iPhone already has amazing stabilization. And so this is just taking it to the next level, so to speak. It really looks impressive. How much it will soften the image, I don't know. The samples they put out look pretty good, but again, it's hard to tell until you get the phone in your hands. The other thing they talked about is their sensor shift stabilization, which they've had around for a couple generations of phones, and they call it the 2nd generation. So they've obviously improved it in some way, and it is hardware based. It's not software based. And so it acts like IBIS on a traditional camera, if you're familiar with that. And so that's pretty cool too. So they are really focusing still on higher end video for filmmakers and for video professionals, or people that use their camera as maybe a B-roll camera or a B camera on bigger shoots, whether you're doing corporate video or YouTube video, indie film, whatever it may be. So I really like that they're still doing that. One thing too, and I am shooting this video to keep in the spirit of things on my iPhone right now. And so they've added focus abilities to the front facing camera, which is nice. That way you can get up and do, I guess you could do macro or close to it and then be far away instead of it being fixed focus. When they changed the ultra wide to having focus, it really made it a much better camera to use. It was interesting though, this year they did not hire a big Hollywood director or get a big production crew to make any type of launch film like they've done the last couple years. I did a video recently about Steven Spielberg making the Marcus Munford music video, and some people speculated that was that, but I could just tell by the behind the scenes and also just the quality of the video, while it was fine, I like it, it didn't look high-end or highly produced like most of the Apple stuff that you see. Now, maybe they'll release some later after the fact that weren't part of the launch. The point to that is, even though they've incrementally upgraded the video, I would say it's incremental. I don't think it's huge. Again, without having the phone in my hands, that's my initial impression. But they did give us the larger sensors, which again is great for better low light performance, and you'll get some nice bokeh shadowed up the field if you have stuff closer to the camera. So ultimately, while I really like these key features, I'm disappointed that there's no USB-C, but the 4K cinematic mode was on my wish list, the larger sensors, and then I'm really interested in this stabilization, this action mode stabilization, and I'm also interested in the sensor shift stabilization because that way you can mount your camera on a car easier or a motorcycle, whatever. You don't get the jello, the warbly look. But that may not be enough for you to upgrade. And it really depends on what iPhone you're using right now. My advice at this point, again, without having the phone in my hand, I could change my mind. Is if you have a 13, this is probably not worth the upgrade. Unless you're really into the cinematic mode or you're really into photography to get that 48 megapixel photo, because being able to crop in to a photo and keep that resolution will be pretty cool. And the demo they showed looked nice. But if you are a 12 or before, although the 12 is still a really good phone, don't get me wrong. If you're before the 12, this is a no-brainer upgrade. But if you are a 12 or a 13, it's iffy. If you're a 13, I'm almost saying no, I'd wait till the 15. I am a 13 Pro guy, but again, because I have this YouTube channel, I'll be upgrading. But whether or not that applies to you, I would say hold off. The 15 is supposed to be a whole generational change, because right now, even though they changed the notch, it's called a dynamic island or something like that, it still looks very much like the 13 Pro or Pro Max. And I'm super curious to see whether these phones will fit in my current cages. Will they work in my B-script cage or my small rig cage? That is something that I'm really interested in. The last couple of years, they've changed just enough to where they don't work. This will probably be the same because we have the different lens, the 24 millimeter and some larger sensors. So the camera bump will probably change, but I'm hoping that they don't. But if they do, that means all new cages. And I mentioned my podcast, and the thing I said in my podcast was it took like 6 months because of the supply chain issues to get all the different lenses and cases and everything. And so it's like I just felt like I got the 13 Pro all where I wanted it, the Pro Max, maybe, I don't know, a couple months ago. And now we're already at the 14. But what I want to know is, what do you think? Will you be upgrading to the 14 Pro? I think it's a very solid update, very solid, a lot of really cool features. And that's not to mention all this cool stuff they did for the actual phone, like the SOS satellite and the crash detection. That stuff's really nice from a pragmatic point of view. Of course, I'm focusing on the camera and in particular video. From a video perspective, is it worth it? Let me know in the comments what you think. Thanks for watching. This is Blake Calhoun. Please like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.